that Islam and democracy are compatible live in the West and are therefore seen as contaminated by non-Islamic ideas.
For the last 50 years, the West in general, the United States, my country in particular, has engaged in a fundamentally cynical, misguided, and incorrect approach to its engagement with countries everywhere in the Muslim world.
I believe that the world can go down one of two paths. And I don't believe it would be a clash of civilizations. I believe it would be a crash of civilizations.
The clash of civilizations, while not inevitable, could happen.
I believe the real question is, can the West truly embrace Islam? My basic principle is you have to be loyal to the truth.
If you're going to experiment with democracy, you have to accept what you get.
Our democracy, our democratic government undermined a democratically elected Muslim government.
The values of democracy are not incompatible with the values of Islam.
We cannot in any way tolerate this kind of us versus them mentality.
It will take the individual efforts of human beings who care to stop this from happening.
Our challenge to the United States of America is to be Americans. And my challenge to the Muslims is to be Muslim. And if we both held to those principles, there wouldn't be any conflict.
He was Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Muhammad, mercy upon mankind. He was Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Muhammad, mercy upon mankind. Teacher of all mankind, Aba al-Qasim, Ya Habibi, Ya Muhammad.
The Quran, the holy book of Islam, contains a number of ideas that some Islamic scholars say support democratic ideals. One is shura, or consultative decision-making. The other is lima, or the principle of consensus. However, Muslim scholars disagree about whether these terms have political application. Is shura obligatory or merely desirable? Binding or non-binding? Another powerful argument for democracy emerges from the principles in the Constitution of Medina, which was written by the Prophet Muhammad in 622 Anno Domini, according to Muqaddad Khan, the director of international studies at Adrian College in Michigan. The document sets down the rules of the community of Medina, as agreed to by Muslims and Jews as a city, and grants equal rights to Jews and Muslims who follow its laws.
His only wish was for us to be among the ones.
At core is the fact that in Islam, God is the giver of laws and men have only limited autonomy to implement and enforce God's laws. These laws, known as Sharia, apply to all aspects of religious, political, social, and private life. Interpreted literally, they can clash with the Western democratic ideals. An Islamic democracy has to navigate tensions created by Islam's traditional rules, such as those that give lesser right to women testimony in Islamic courts and those that dictate corporal punishment, such as death by stoning for female adulterers. Modern Islamic democracies have reinterpreted or chosen not to enforce some or all of these laws. Some Muslim scholars argue against democracy because they see it as a system in which the whim of the majority is the source of law. The counter-arguments to this, says John Awal, professor of Islamic history at Georgetown University, is that all nations create laws, whether they are monarchies, dictatorship, or democracies. And in a democracy, more checks exist on men's whim than in an autocracy. In many Arab nations, Islamist parties command the support of between 35% and 40% of the population. When people say they want democracy, you have to ask, what would that mean? Whose interest would the democracy serve? It appears so, but at the same time support for organized Islamist parties with inherently anti-democratic views is also strong. The complexity of the political situation in the Muslim world is reflected in the recent survey, which found both that majorities in the 9 predominantly Muslim nations surveyed believe that democracy can work in their countries, and that Osama bin Laden is one of their 3 most trusted world leaders. Respondents also favored the prominent, in many cases expanded, role for Islam and religious leaders in national politics. But majorities in most countries also said they valued ideals associated with democracy, such as freedom of the press. In many Arab nations, Islamic parties command the support of between 35% and 40% of the population. When people say they want democracy, he says, you have to ask, what would that mean? Whose interest would the democracy serve?